What's going on, guys? What's up? What's up? What's up? Let's get some viewers in here. Let's wait for some people to join the stream, and then we'll get things going here momentarily, answering some of your questions, getting some of your favorite plays out there. We'll start doing a little bit of live research, seeing if taking the over or under on fantasy points, real life points, rebounds, assists, if any of that stuff makes any sense today. We got a couple of games about to tip off here. We've already got one game underway, so I'd appreciate it if you guys had questions to keep your questions in kind of like chronological order. In other words, let's talk about the earlier games first, and we can get into questions about some of the later games as things develop. So something new that I want to do and continue to do for you guys. Hit me up if you have any questions. What's up, Asif? Asif? AI? Allen Iverson? I hope I'm saying your name right. Hit me with any questions you have. While we're waiting for people to get in here, we could start looking at some of the injury news. As you can see, quite a few players here up on the board. Big names, too. Big names in terms of injuries. So apologize if I'm talking about anybody that is irrelevant or if the game has already started, but we're just going to go through these real quick here. So Kevin Durant, small forward, Brooklyn Nets facing Washington. He is out with a hamstring, out indefinitely. We got Joel Embiid, center for the Philadelphia 76ers. They take on the Knicks. He's going to be out indefinitely as well with a knee injury. Anthony Davis, power forward for the Los Angeles Lakers, he is out due to COVID protocol, out indefinitely. LeBron James also out indefinitely for the Lakers with an ankle injury. Bad ankle injury for LeBron James. Unfortunate news if you're a Lakers fan. What's happening, Kevin? KD. SGA, Oklahoma City Thunder, out Sunday with a shoulder injury. Al Horford, Oklahoma City Thunder, out due to rest. Lonzo Ball, New Orleans Pelicans, questionable with a hip flexor. We got Ben Simmons, point guard for the 76ers. He was out last night. He is questionable to play today with a knee injury. Darius Bazley, Oklahoma City Thunder, out as well with a shoulder injury. So OKC is just all kinds of beat up right now. Give me some good news on Plumlee boards. I have a ton of him today. All right, we'll look at Plumlee boards. We'll look at that. Tristan Thompson, center for the Boston Celtics. He's out against Orlando. COVID protocol. Alfred Payton, point guard Knicks, questionable with a hamstring. Michael Carter-Williams, Orlando Magic. My poor Orlando Magic. He's questionable with a non-COVID illness. They got to put that out there, that it's a non-COVID illness. Marc Gasol, center for the Los Angeles Lakers, facing Phoenix. He's questionable due to conditioning. He's still trying to work his way back. He's been out for a bit with a COVID protocol label on him. Kevin Love is still out for the Cleveland Cavaliers with a calf injury. Wayne Ellington, Detroit Pistons, is out. Mason, what's happening, my man? What is going on? You guys start dropping some questions. I've already got one in there from my man AI. I'm just going to call him AI because it sounds cool and it's a lot easier to say. But yeah, you guys start dropping some questions if you have them. Otherwise, Wayne Ellington, Emmanuel Quickly, Kevin Porter Jr., Goran Dragic, Terrence Ross, Eric Gordon, David Bertans, Seth Curry, Derrick Rose, Mitchell Robinson. All these guys are on the injury report. You kind of get the gist here. A lot of guys sitting out here on this Sunday basketball slate. So I hope you have an awesome day too, Mason. And I appreciate those kind words, my friend. I appreciate that. All right. Let's take a look at some Plumlee boards. He's got a ton of Plumlee boards. I hope Plumlee rebounds is the way to go here. Now, you didn't say if you took the over or under on Plumlee board, so I'm guessing you probably took the over because taking the over is just way more fun typically. So let's go down and take a look here. Where is Mason Plumlee? All the way down at the bottom at 9.5 rebounds. 9.5 rebounds. I like using this little defense versus archetype fantasy basketball tool that RotoGrinders has, just to take a glimpse at guys who might be in good, like, plus rebound, plus assist spots. So let's look at that first and see if Mason Plumlee's name pops up here. Mason. Not seeing any Mason Plumlee at the top of the board here. So not that he's in a bad spot. He's just not in a plus or positive rebound spot from what I can see. I don't see any Mason Plumlee. Let's just double check here. We'll filter out all teams. We'll just take a look at the Detroit Pistons and their roster. And there you go. So he's in a little bit of a negative spot. I wouldn't say that this is anything to be worried about. Nothing that's going to have a big impact on how he rebounds the basketball today. So not too worried about that. Absolutely, Chris. We can go over the Lakers' depth for sure, buddy. Whatever you want, man. This is all for you guys. I do this for you guys. So, all right. So Mason Plumlee over rebounds. Yeah. So he's in a little bit of a negative spot, but nothing to be worried about. Not worried about that whatsoever. Let's take a look at some of Mason Plumlee's recent game logs here. Click on his name. It'll bring up all of his game logs, and we could take a look and see how he has been rebounding the basketball. It's not going to let me scroll over, is it? All right, we'll go full screen. It's still not going to work for me. Well, it's not letting me scroll over here. That's all right. There's always ways around stuff like this. Boom, snap that guy back in place. Let's go over to lineups.com. One of my favorite sites. Lineups.com is great because it lets you look at like season game averages, 30 game averages, 10 game averages. So I like referencing this as a way to get an idea of how a particular player has been performing, whether it be a single stat or, whatever. They've got it all here. So Mason Plumlee, you could see for the season, 9.5 rebounds. So that's exactly what he's projected for today on PrizePicks. So that would be a push if you look at his season averages. If you look at his 30-game averages, Mason Plumlee drops down a little bit to 9.4 rebounds. So that would be an under. And then in his last 10, which to me is the most telling how a guy's been doing recently or lately, 10.6 rebounds per game. So his rebound numbers have gone up. So I would say that's encouraging news for Mason Plumlee and his rebounds. We could take a look at RotoWire real quick and see how Mason Plumlee's looking in terms of props, player props that people are putting out there on Plumlee. All right, so you can see 9.5 rebounds over on DraftKings Sportsbook. It's pretty even here. No lean one way or the other, over or under. You can see on FanDuel Sportsbook, they've got him at a slight over. 8.5 rebounds here on BetMGM. They're definitely taking the over on the 8.5, which I would too. I think that makes a lot of sense. So points bet, they've got him at 9.5 as well. And it looks like the majority is going with the over on Mason Plumlee at 9.5 rebounds. So yeah, I think Mason Plumlee at 9.5 rebounds makes a lot of sense. Let's go to Basketball Reference real quick and just look at his recent game log since we weren't able to get that through RotoWire. Go to his game logs, go to the 2021 season. We scroll on down the way here, and you can see in his last few games, total rebounds, just been crushing the board. 16, 14, 12, 9, 8, 13, 11. So, I mean, you could see in his last 5 games, he's went over 1, 2, 3 out of 5. That ain't bad. Hey, I would take the over on Mason Plumlee rebounds, so hopefully that helps you out there. I think that's a good play. Let's see here. Can we go over the Lakers depth next? What do you mean by Lakers depth exactly? Lakers depth. I think it's just you, Nathan. I think. No sound. Anybody else having sound issues? Let me know. Let me know. We're winging this thing, man. And there could be technical issues. There could be some technical difficulties here, but I think the other people are getting sound. Sounds good. Goat DFS. Appreciate that. Nathan, I'm going to say it's on you. I'm going to say the sound issues are your issues. You wanted to talk about Lakers depth. Well, cool thing about RotoGrinders here And they ought to be paying me, honestly, the way that I show off their website. But anyway, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Marc Gasol, Damian Jones. If we scroll over to the side here, you can kind of get an idea of what happens when these guys are out. So Anthony Davis with James out as well. Look for Kuzma and Schroeder to be the top offensive weapons and very strong plays with Morris, a great source of salary relief. Of course, with PrizePicks, we're not worried about salary. That's more for like FanDuel and DraftKings sites, but it says Montrezl Harrell is the top center now with Damian Jones out. So now with LeBron James being out, Kuzma will likely start and be a very strong play, while Schroeder should be a top play as well. And the main facilitator on offense, Markieff Morris, is still extremely cheap and should provide solid value. Again, don't worry about the cheap, the price tag stuff. That's for FanDuel, DraftKings. With Marc Gasol out, Jones, which we've already talked about, Jones is gone. So it's all about Montrezl Harrell here at the center position. Harrell will continue to cover the center minutes, with Harrell having solid upside with Davis and James out as well. And then finally, Damian Jones. He did not have his 10-day contract renewed by the Lakers, so they're just rolling with Montrezl Harrell until Marc Gasol gets ready to come back, and I would imagine he's getting really close to coming back. So looks like Montrezl Harrell is going to get the bulk of the work until Marc Gasol's back. So hopefully that answers your questions about the Los Angeles Lakers and their depth. Christian Wood over on points. Woo! Let's get to it. That game's starting soon. Christian Wood, 20 points. 20 points over on PrizePicks. So let's take a look at Christian Woods real quick and see how things are looking for him. Now I want to take a look at the projected starting lineup. I don't know what it is yet for the Houston Rockets, but it looks like it's going to be John Wall, Victor Oladipo, Daniel House, Christian Wood, and Jae'Sean Tate. All right. Well, knowing that, let's see if we can go to Court IQ. Maybe we can get an idea of what this team will look like with all these guys on the court. So if we turn John Wall on, Christian Wood on, Victor Oladipo on, Jae'Sean Tate. All right, we'll go with that. And Daniel House, boom. Let's see if these guys have any minutes together. They do. They have very few minutes, but just a small sample size. These 5 guys have only taken the court together for about 17 minutes of gameplay. So you wanted to know about Christian Wood and his scoring. So let's take a look at points here. So you can see that in this very small sample size, Christian Wood hit 25.5 points based on a 36-minute basis. So in other words, he'd have to play 36 minutes in order for him to hit the 25.56 projection here. On a per minute basis, Christian Wood in this small sample size, I want to keep pointing that out because these guys haven't played a ton of minutes together. Still not quite sure what we're going to get here, but 0.71 points. So 0.71 points. If we take a look at the projected minutes for Christian Wood today, and then boop, click that, we go over to his minutes. So Christian Wood is expected to play 28 minutes. So 28 times the 0.71 should give you a rough idea of what he is expected to score today. So let's do that real quick. I'll just do it on my phone since it's a lot easier. I got the stream going. 19.88 points. 19.88 points. So we're cutting it super close. If he plays 28 minutes, and based on the sample size that we have at 0.71 points per minute, he'll be really, really close to 20. Let's take a look at some of the props here and see if we can find Christian Wood and how people are betting on his points. So over on DraftKings Sportsbook, he's at 18.5 points. People are definitely taking the over on 18.5, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But even at 19.5, they're taking the over on FanDuel Sportsbook. And then if we look at points bet at 19.5, people are taking the over on 19.5 too. So I think there's a good shot that he can go over or at least 20 points or more. So you're looking at a push based on what I'm seeing, worst case scenario. So hopefully that answers your question on Christian Wood, and you lock that in. Aaron Gordon over on points. Let's take a look at Aaron Gordon real quick. He's at 15.5 points. Orlando Magic taking on the Boston Celtics. This one tips off at 3:40 p.m. AG, he had a great scoring night the other night. So we'll take a look at Aaron Gordon and see what he can do here. Do we have a projection for the starting lineup for the Magic? Looks like it might be Michael Carter-Williams, Evan Fournier, Aaron Gordon, Al-Farouq Aminu, and Nikola Vucevic. So yeah, I mean, just based on this lineup right here, projected lineup, I would say that the Magic are going to have to lean on the likes of Vucevic, obviously, Aaron Gordon, and Evan Fournier to get the bulk of their points. So already I kind of like this situation here for Aaron Gordon. Let's see if we could take a look at some of his stats here for the season, for his last 30 games, 10 games. Now, I know he's missed a lot of time. He was coming off of a pretty bad ankle injury. So for the season, he's averaging 14.8 points, which would put him under today's projection of 15 on PrizePicks. Let's see if that changes at all. 14.8 in his last 30, and then in the last 10, he's up to 15 points. But as I mentioned, he missed a ton of games, so we're going to have to go a little bit further here on Aaron Gordon. Let's see what he's been up to in the last few games, couple games, however many he's played since returning from injury. So you can see, guys, he was inactive for a ton of games. He comes back here for this one, plays just 13 minutes. Can't really look at that one for a reliable sample. Misses the next 2 games. All right, and then we got 2 game logs here where he plays 31 minutes and 36 minutes. These are probably going to be a little bit more reliable in terms of a sample size. So 17, that puts him over 15.5. 38, that puts him over as well. One other thing that I like to look at in this situation is the game totals and spread. Now, Orlando's, they're not projected to score a whole lot of points, 103.75 points. So I do wish those point totals were a little bit higher. But Aaron Gordon for points, I mean, I think that makes some sense going over on his points. Let's take a look and see if they have him up on the sports books. They do. DraftKings has him up at 15.5, same as PrizePicks, but you could see that there is no action one way or the other, the over, the under. FanDuel, they've got him up at 15.5. Looks like people are taking the under on FanDuel. BetMGM, 15.5. People are taking the under there. But these are slight unders. And then finally, PointsBet. I mean, they're pretty much split on Aaron Gordon at 15.5 points. If I'm going one way or the other, I mean, I'm probably going to take the over here. He's, in the 2 games since returning, he's went over in both of them. I don't think that this is a particularly difficult matchup for him, but let's just take a look at that real quick before we give you kind of that final answer, that final verdict here. So if we go to the DVA for Aaron Gordon, you can see that he's a versatile forward. Versatile forwards against the Boston Celtics have averaged 28.86 fantasy points per game. So that's fantasy points, not real life points. But this matchup, I don't think is a super tough one. And I'm not really worried about fatigue or anything like that. I know it says 3 games in 4 nights, but Aaron Gordon should be fresh after a long layoff. So yeah, I'd probably lean toward the over on Aaron Gordon points. So hopefully that answers your question. DeAndre Jordan. What about DeAndre Jordan? Give me more. You want like DeAndre Jordan fantasy points, DeAndre Jordan real life points, assists, rebounds? What do we got here for DeAndre Jordan? Let's take a look. We'll go fantasy score. DeAndre Jordan. He's up here at 20 fantasy points right now. So let's start with that. Let's look at his fantasy score real quick. Brooklyn taking on the Washington Wizards. Anytime you take on Washington, man, that's like getting a fantasy stimmy right there. I mean, if you want more real life points, more rebounds, more assists, more fantasy points, you play the Washington Wizards and all of those things go up. Fantasy points, perfect. So he's at 20 fantasy points. If we go over here and look at his fantasy points on Roto Grinders, they got him at 20.97, which means we should probably lean towards the over on DeAndre Jordan. Now, he's expected to play just 22 minutes today. Good news for him is that post-up bigs versus the Washington Wizards have averaged 28.26 fantasy points per game. So looking like a good situation here in terms of matchup for DeAndre Jordan. Let's look at how he's performed with this 20 fantasy point number in mind over his last 5 games. Going back here to March 11th against Boston, 14.1. That puts him under the 20. 30.8, 22.5 overs. Then he drops back below 20 with just 13. And then in his last game against Orlando, 24. So in his last 5 games, he's went over 20 fantasy points in 3 out of 5. Now, we can take a look here at game logs versus the Washington Wizards. Go back in time here. You could see that back here on January 31st, he faced the Wizards. He ended up playing just 19 minutes, almost 19 minutes in that one, but finished with an impressive 22.6 fantasy points. Good enough for the over in that one. So if he plays more than this 18, 19 minutes, then I think 20 fantasy points is well within reach for DeAndre Jordan. Do we have any other game logs we could look at? Well, yeah, January 3rd, he only played 14 minutes in that one, logged just 8 fantasy points. So his minutes are up, and he should be playing a lot more minutes in this one. I am concerned because I think Blake Griffin is expected to play for the Brooklyn Nets today. Does he impact? Yeah, he is probable to play. Does he impact DeAndre Jordan at all? I don't know. They said that Griffin's going to probably be on a minutes limit, so it's a wait and see for him in terms of DFS, but it says here eventually he will cut into both Jeff Green and DeAndre Jordan's upside. So I don't know that that happens today. I do think he does play some minutes and works himself into the rotation here slowly but surely. So does the over on Julius Randle at 45 fantasy points full game look good? Brandon, let's find out. Thanks for tuning in, Brandon, by the way. Let's head over to Julius Randle on PrizePicks and see if that 45 over is looking good or if the under is looking good. Where's he at here? Moving on down. There he is. 45 fantasy points for Julius Randle. Perfect. Let's start and see if there's any New York Knicks specific injury news that might impact Randle. Well, a lot of guys are expected to be out or questionable for the Knicks, but most of them are guards. So Elfrid Payton, Emmanuel Quickley, Derrick Rose, Austin Rivers. Now, one guy that might impact Julius Randle a little bit, we'll have to take a look here, is Mitchell Robinson. He's questionable with a hand injury. He had right hand surgery. It says that he is in, but he will likely be on a minutes limit in his first game back. But this would make all the Knicks big men outside of Randle very hard to trust for daily fantasy sports. So maybe he doesn't impact Julius Randle as much as we think. Do we have a projected starting lineup here for the New York Knicks? Let's take a gander. Let's find out. So it looks like it's going to be Elfrid Payton, R.J. Barrett, Reggie Bullock, Julius Randle, and Nerlens Noel. So I don't know if I trust that projected starting lineup, but we'll just get into the projections for Julius Randle and look at the game totals and stuff like that and go from there, because I think it's a little murky in terms of who's going to be starting for the Knicks. So we sort this out here by fantasy points. So you can see Roto Grinders, they're a little under on Julius Randle at 43, and for good reason. I mean, if you look at the game totals here, Philadelphia 107, New York 106. It's a 1-point spread. So although the totals aren't super high, normally I look for like 225, 230 combined points here for these teams or more. In terms of fantasy upside, fantasy potential, not getting that here. It's going to be a low total game, but the fact that the spread is just 1 point gives me hope that Julius Randle will be out there for 4 quarters of basketball. Hopefully this thing doesn't blow out like the Philadelphia-Sacramento game last night, because that definitely had a negative impact on some of the guys that we took from that game. But Julius Randle at 45, we could take a look at his recent game logs and see if the 45 has been a number to go over or under on. And you can see in his last 5 games, they are looking pretty good in terms of an over. Against Milwaukee, he drops just 22 fantasy points, but the reason for that is he only played 28 minutes in that game, so his minutes were definitely down in that one. Now, over his last 4 games, this dude's been playing major minutes. 39 minutes, 41 minutes, 40, 39, so huge minutes for him, floating right around that 40-minute per game mark in his last 4 games. Now, in those games, you could see tremendous fantasy point output. 61 fantasy points, 60, 47, and 56.5. So in his last 5 games, he's went over 4 times on this 45 fantasy point number. So I do like the over on Julius Randle based on what I'm seeing in his recent game logs, I am just slightly worried about the matchup. Versatile bigs versus his Philadelphia 76ers squad have been held to just 21 fantasy points per game. But I will point out that there is no Joel Embiid. So how that impacts them on a defensive front, well, we'll have to find out. But yeah, I don't mind Julius Randle here at all, especially if his minutes go from this 36 projection up to like 39 or 40 where he's been playing in recent games. I definitely think he can get to 45 or more. So hopefully that helps you out there. Sound is good. Sound is good. Good. Dennis Schroeder, full game fantasy points. Dennis Schroeder. All right, let's take a look. As we mentioned, there's a ton of guys out for the Lakers right now, big impact guys, and guys like Dennis Schroeder, Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell will have to step up for this Lakers team. So if we go and we find Mr. Dennis Schroeder, he's at 38 fantasy points right now. Taylor Gangus, what's up, bro? Thanks for tuning in. Dennis Schroeder at 38 fantasy points. We take a look at him over here on Roto Grinders. He's at 34, so they're liking a pretty sizable under so far on Dennis Schroeder in this projection on PrizePicks. So he is a combo guard. Now, working out in his favor is the fact that combo guards against the Phoenix Suns, they get 48 fantasy points per game or more on average. So loving the matchup here for Dennis Schroeder taking on the Phoenix Suns. Let's take a look at his recent game logs and see how this 38 fantasy number has done for Dennis Schroeder in terms of overs or unders. So if we go back to March 12th, that's the 5th game back in his game log. You see he's got 33 points there. That's not good enough for an over. 17, 25, so that's 3 unders. He goes over here against Charlotte with 38.3 and then drops back under in his last game against Atlanta with just 30.4. Now, of course, most of those games, all of those games included LeBron James. LeBron will not be in the lineup. So maybe we could take a look at Court IQ here and they can help us, formulate a better opinion of Dennis Schroeder without some of these main guys in the fold. So LeBron, will take him off. We'll take Marc Gasol off. We'll take Anthony Davis off. We'll put Dennis Schroeder on. Damian Jones, he won't be around. We'll click him off. We'll click Jared Dudley off. He's been out. Montrezl Harrell. I think all these other guys are probably good here. So let's see what happens when we run this little query here. And all right, cool. So we get a pretty decent sized sample here in terms of how Schroeder and company have performed with said guys off the floor. You can see that Schroeder's logged 154 minutes without all those guys in the lineup or on the court. Now, if we scroll over here, look at it from a per 36 minute basis. So this means that, if he plays 36 minutes, this is what we can expect. He has averaged 38.38 fantasy points, which would be 0.38 fantasy points enough for him to go over his fantasy points today. So I think that the fact that he has gone over in the sample size that we have here, he has gone over 38 fantasy points and the matchup is so good, are definitely working in his favor. But I am a little bit concerned that the game total here for LA is just 102.75 and Phoenix is at 112.25. So you're talking about almost like a 10-point spread here. So if it's a blowout, will Dennis Schroeder play major minutes? Tough to tell, but he definitely gets a big bump, obviously, without guys like Anthony Davis and stuff in the lineup. So if you look down here, this shows kind of the differentials for Dennis Schroeder and company without those guys on the lineup. You can see that Dennis Schroeder's fantasy points per game are on a per 36 minute basis go up by nearly 6 fantasy points. So he scores about 6 more fantasy points per 36 minutes with all those guys we took off of the floor. So hopefully that helps you out in terms of Dennis Schroeder full game fantasy points. I'd probably lean toward the over here, but there is some concern with, the spread being what it is, the totals being so low on the Lakers side. So might be one of those situations where you look elsewhere and you kind of take a wait and see approach on Dennis Schroeder until you kind of see how things play out with this new cast of characters for the Los Angeles Lakers. Devin Booker, real life points. Thanks for the question, Kyrie. Are you like Kyrie Irving, or is it Kyre, like fire? Let me know, man. I don't want to mess your name up. But yeah, we can take a look definitely at Devin Booker, real life points. Let's scroll up to the single stats. We got points selected, and let's go find some book. As we've already talked about, Devin Booker and the Phoenix Suns are expected to blow out this Los Angeles Lakers team. So some definite blowout risk here. And I don't know if it's just me, but I'm not seeing Devin Booker up here for points. Real points. Yeah, I don't see him up here on the board yet, but we can take a look at him and try to formulate an idea of where Devin Booker might land. They don't have him up, though, yet for single stat points. But let's take a look at Devin Booker anyways, because my man asked for it. We're going to give it to him. All right, so his fantasy points, he's at 35.8 fantasy points. This matchup here, scoring wings do pretty well against the Lakers, especially a Lakers team that you have to imagine is pretty beat up. Like Kyrie Irving, but without the I. I got you. Perfect. Let's look at Devin Booker real quick. Get an idea how he's been performing in his last few games here in terms of real life points. So we don't have a projection up on PrizePicks yet for real life points, but you could see in his last 5 games, 35, 20, 27, 35, 16. So last 5 games, he's been scoring the basketball much better coming out of the All-Star break. Most of these games here, he's going 20 or more real-life points. Not sure where they're going to have him set in terms of real-life points once he does hit the PrizePicks board. But let's look at his season averages real quick, and we can take a look at how Devin Booker's been doing over the course of the season, 30 games, and over the course of his last 30 and 10 games. And why is he not coming up? No Devin Booker? Are you kidding me? Interesting. Well, I can't find him on here. Let's take a look at Basketball Reference real quick. Great website, by the way, Basketball Reference. All right, so for the season, he's averaging 25.1 points. So, I mean, that's looking pretty good here. And then for his career, you can see he's a 22.7 point scorer. So we know Devin Booker can definitely get buckets over his last several games here. Going back beyond the 5, you know, he was going through a little bit of a scoring problem here. You know, 22, 17, you know, 23, 23, 22. So those are all below his season average. But I think he's doing a lot better since coming out of the All-Star break. We could take a look at RotoWire, and maybe they've got like a prop up for Devin Booker. We can start getting an idea of what to do here. They got him at 25.5 on DraftKings Sportsbook. Right now, the action is just kind of split. 113 for the over, 113 for the under, 25.5 on FanDuel Sportsbook. People are taking the over on that 25.5. You could see over on BetMGM, he's at 25.5. People are taking the under right now at 25.5. And then over on PointsBet, 25.5 points there. So I'm going to guess that PrizePicks, knowing them like I do, will probably have his real life points at 25. And they'll make you decide if he's going to go over or under the 25. Just based on how these other sports books have them, PrizePicks likes to kind of split the difference here on the action. And I would not be surprised to see Devin Booker at 25 real life points. Oh, maybe they posted it and then they took him down. Okay. Thad Young over 28 fantasy points. How does that look for full game? Let's take a look from my man B Meadows, Brandon. We will see how that looks here. Fantasy score. Thaddeus Young. There he is. 28 fantasy points taking on the Detroit Pistons. Okay, cool. We got Thaddeus Young here. So let's go to that game and see how the Bulls and Pistons are looking. Looks like Chicago's expected to score 110 or more points. Detroit 107. So pretty decent game totals. Not a super high scoring game here between these two teams. The spread is good though. So guys like Thaddeus Young and others should play plenty of minutes here. You can see that Roto Grinders, they've got him at 29.23 fantasy points. So they like a slight over on this 28 fantasy projection. He's a versatile forward. The Detroit Pistons have allowed 27.72 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards like Thaddeus Young. Now, their ranking is 29th, meaning that they are the 29th most stingy or least giving or least generous to versatile forwards. So on paper, it's looking like a tough matchup for him. This is 2 games and 3 nights in terms of his rest situation. He plays over 25 minutes per game, 1.21 fantasy points per minute, and his usage ratings at about 21.5. So never trust a dude named Thaddeus. I think I've known one Thaddeus, one real life person named Thaddeus in my life. Now, let's look at his last 5 games because this is quite interesting when you take into consideration where he's projected on both PrizePicks and on Roto Grinders. His last 5 games have actually been pretty darn good. He's been going over 28 pretty regularly here. Actually, even if you go back even further in his game logs, 25 has been a number that he's been crushing, or 28 has been a number that he's been crushing. So I'm just going to go all the way back here. This is about 10 or 12 games, I think, here in his game log. Over, under, over. I don't know about you guys, but like in 10 to 12 games, he's only went under 1 time, and he barely went under at 26.9. You may have stumbled upon a little gem here, Brandon, in Thaddeus Young. This dude's been over 28 fantasy points for quite some time here. They might have him a little bit too low here. So I think I'm rocking with Roto Grinders and taking the over. This 29.23 is probably better than this 28 projection. So I think that Thaddeus Young can get it done here, even though the matchup doesn't look like a particularly good one. Oh, one other thing that I could do for you is look at his recent games against Detroit. Okay, so he faced Detroit back on February 17th and dropped 37.5 fantasy points. Even more reason to lean toward the over on Thaddeus Young. I don't see any other game logs, but yeah, I mean, dude, 28 fantasy points doesn't look like enough for Thaddeus Young. I would probably lean toward the over as well. So what are you guys thinking? Any other questions or anything? Or is that going to do it for today? You guys let me know. I'm here for you. As long as you guys have questions, I'll hang around. But if you guys, if you guys don't have anything else for me, I'll get out of here. Loving the live stream. Appreciate that, man. Yeah, I want to do more of this kind of stuff for you guys. And, I do a lot of typing and researching and posting and Discord. I'd like to get more into doing these live streams, live research for you guys. I think it's a pretty cool little format, way to interact with the community for sure. What are your favorite plays on the slate? Well, if you've been paying attention, Mr. Mason, I think Thaddeus Young over 28 fantasy points is looking pretty darn juicy. This is a first look for me. So, I can't tell you that I've done extensive research on everything that's going on PrizePicks NBA today. I haven't looked at everybody in terms of fantasy points. I haven't looked at everybody in terms of real life rebounds, assists. Overlay DFS. I'm not familiar with Overlay DFS. Is that like another DFS fantasy platform or something like that? I haven't heard of that one. I've heard of, obviously PrizePicks, Monkey Knife Fight. I've heard of Thrive. I've heard of Betcha. Have not heard of Overlay DFS. Yeah, so you have to let me know what that is. Westbrook, 9.5 rebounds. We could look at Westbrook, 9.5 rebounds. Mason, just stay tuned, buddy. I'm going to keep looking at some other names here, and maybe somebody else will jump out at you, and you can take that as a good play. There's no such thing as locks. So when you guys use the term like, give me your lock, give me your, this is sports gambling, and there are no locks. There are no sure things here, but we do our best to try and narrow it down for you guys and put you onto some good plays here. So let's go down to lineups.com, look at the Washington Wizards real quick, and we'll look at the season averages for Russell Westbrook in terms of rebounds. So for the season, 9.6 rebounds. That puts him over the 9.5 mark. So far, so good if you're looking to take the over on Russell Westbrook. Now, in his last 30 games, he drops down to 9.2 rebounds. But if I'm not mistaken, he pops back up in his last 10. He does. 9.4 rebounds. So the 9.5 rebounds in his last 30 games and his last 10 games have been a little difficult for Russell Westbrook to hit. Today, he is taking on the Brooklyn Nets, and we can look at how he's done in his more recent games here, in like his last 5, and see how he's been rebounding the basketball. So in his last 5, he has went over against Utah, over against Sacramento. He goes way under against Milwaukee, over against Milwaukee in this one, and then under against Philadelphia. So he's got 3 overs, 2 unders in his last 5 games in terms of hitting this 9.5 rebound mark. I do like the totals in this game. There should be plenty of shots going up, plenty of opportunities for rebounds because of the increase in shots going up. The spread is a little worrisome. It's an 8.5 point spread. Hopefully Washington can find a way to make this game competitive and stick around. We can also look and see if he's got any previous games against the Brooklyn Nets here and see how he rebounded the basketball against them in that previous matchup. Scrolling through, here we go. We've got a game back on January 3rd, so it's quite some time ago, but in that game, he has just 5 rebounds against Brooklyn in that one. So not encouraging. I'm not seeing a super strong indication that Russell Westbrook goes over 9.5 rebounds. It might be better to take the under. Let's just take a look here at the different sports books. They got Russell Westbrook up on DraftKings Sportsbook at 9.5 rebounds. The action is pretty split, pretty divided, not looking strong one way or the other there. FanDuel Sportsbook, people are taking the under on the 9.5 rebounds. BetMGM, they're taking the over on the 9.5 rebounds. And finally, PointsBet, people are taking the under pretty strongly here on the 9.5 rebounds. So this is one that is a bit shaky, a bit dicey. I think you might just want to look elsewhere and not try to roll the dice on Russell Westbrook in these rebounds. Zion full game fantasy points and Zach LaVine fantasy points. Cool. JT real points. JT. Jason Tatum? I think you're talking maybe Jason Tatum. But first things first, let's talk Zion full game fantasy points for Trill Native. Trill Native for sure. We could do that for you. So we head on over to PrizePicks here. Zion Williamson. Let's find him. He's at 43 fantasy points right now. So let's take a look at Zion and see where he is projected and the game totals and the spreads and everything like that and see how it's looking. So first and foremost, I would say that the game totals are looking fantastic here in this one. Over 230 combined real points. So that is a good barometer for fantasy upside, fantasy potential. Talking about a spread of just 6 points here. I do like the potential for people to go over real life points, rebounds, assists. When those totals are that high, it's usually beneficial for all players involved. Now, his projection over on RotoGrinders is quite a bit lower than the 43 that he's projected at on PrizePicks. He is under on RotoGrinders by almost 3 points. So under looking like the way to go here. But we're going to dig in a little bit deeper on Zion and see if he's been going over or under 43 points in his last few games since All-Star break. So you can see coming out of All-Star break, he was a bit underperforming, we'll say. 30 puts him well under today's projection of 43. 33 under. 34 puts him under. But in his last 2 games, he is bouncing back. But they were both against Portland. Both against Portland, he puts up 47 and 47.5. Now, maybe we can go back and find a game log of him versus this Nuggets team just to get a better idea, see how he has performed against the Nuggets in the past. And I'm scrolling back, and I went back pretty far here, all the way back to December, and I'm not seeing any previous game logs of him versus the Nuggets. So him being a versatile forward, the Nuggets do a pretty good job at defending versatile forwards. They've limited versatile forwards like Zion Williamson to just 34 fantasy points per game on the season. Now, he should be well rested. This is not a back-to-back situation or anything like that for him. He's been playing over 32 minutes per game for the season. Fantasy points per minute are at 1.26, pretty good there, and his usage is over 28. So high game totals, spread, fairly competitive here. I do think that there's a chance that Zion Williamson can go over 43. His last 2 games have looked good. Looks like he's starting to get back in the swing of things since All-Star break. So the other guy you asked about was Zach LaVine. We could look at Zach LaVine real quick. He's at 42 today. It was weird. The other day he was at 38 fantasy points. Now they've bumped him up to 42. So let's look at Zach LaVine, get an idea of the game situation, the totals, the spread, and all that. See if Zach LaVine can potentially go over his fantasy projection of 42. So you got Chicago at 110. You got Detroit at 107. So you're talking about a 3-point spread here. Totals aren't super high, looking at 217.5 real life points. So not super high there. So they got him at 42 on PrizePicks, but he's at just 37.37 over on RotoGrinders. So for a scoring wing against Detroit, Detroit has done a good job against scoring wings, it looks like, this season. So they've allowed just 21.35 fantasy points per game to scoring wings like Zach LaVine. So I would say that the matchup does not look too good here for Zach LaVine to go over 42 fantasy points. Let's see how he's been playing since All-Star break, though. All right, so he's got 6 games in his game log since the All-Star break. Coming out of the All-Star break, his first game against Philly, 30 fantasy points puts him under. He goes over here with 47, drops way back down here at just 26, goes over in his next 2 games with 48 and 49. And then finally his last game, which was against the Denver Nuggets, puts up just 37 fantasy points. So that was the day that PrizePicks had him at 38, I believe, and he ended up going under 38. So I think a lot of people thought 38, that sounds too low for Zach LaVine. I'm going to take the over. Well, he didn't end up going over 38, so I'm a little weary here with Zach LaVine. I'm not sure if the 42 is too high or if it's too low. But if anything, I would probably trust RotoGrinders, and I would take the under on Zach LaVine in this 42. But he's been a guy that it looks like he's been tough to project here. So game totals, not super high. Spread is good, which means he will play plenty of minutes. They've got him projected at 35 minutes today. But yeah, I would just probably look elsewhere, either that or take the under on Zach LaVine. Jason Tatum, real points. Let's look at it. Jason Tatum, Boston Celtics. They are taking on my Orlando Magic. Is he going to kill the Magic today? Probably. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they match Aaron Gordon up with him. Aaron Gordon, pretty good defender. But yeah, Jason Tatum at 23.5 points, which means if you're looking at maybe taking the over, he's got to hit 24 points. If you're taking the under, he's got to go for less, 23 points or less. So let's look at this game total and everything real quick. Orlando 103, Boston 112. So you're looking at about a 9-point spread, 8 to 9 point spread. So Boston definitely the favorite at home. This game tips off here at 3:30 in about an hour on the East Coast. So let's see what Jason Tatum's been doing in his last few games. You can see in his last 5, since coming out of All-Star break, he's been playing pretty good basketball in terms of fantasy production, but we're looking at real life points. So at 23.5, he went over against Brooklyn with 31. He goes under against Houston with just 23. Then he goes over his next 2 games against Utah and Cleveland with 29 in each of those. Then he drops back down to 15 against Sacramento. So overall, in his last few games here, he's went over the 23.5, 3 out of 5. So pretty good success rate. We can dial it back and look at his previous matchup here against the Orlando Magic, if there is one. They did play the Magic. That was back on January 15th. He did not suit up for that game, though, so he did not play against the Magic in their previous matchup. But we can go a step further here for you and take a look at his averages for the season for 30 games and 10 games and see how Jason Tatum's been scoring the basketball. So for the season, he's averaging 25 points. So for the over, that looks like it makes some sense. For his last 30 games, 25.1. So you can see that his scoring average has went up slightly when you look at those 30 game averages. Now in his last 10 games, his scoring has dropped down to 22.1, almost 3 points lower than what it was over his last 30 games. So that does worry me a little bit. This is a guy that's been kind of hard to trust. So I would be careful with taking Jason Tatum and these overs on his points. But let's finally go and look at the various sports books. Maybe we can get a better idea on Jason Tatum and how people are betting on this 23.5 real life point prop. You can see DraftKings Sportsbooks has them up at 23.5. They're taking the over on the 23.5. FanDuel, they're kind of split, not really seeing any action one way or the other. Over on BetMGM at 23.5, people are taking the over. And then finally at PointsBet, 23.5. It's pretty split there as well. So I wouldn't say that I'm seeing a super strong lean toward the over or the under on Jason Tatum. Honestly, this one feels more like a coin flip, a roll of the dice. I don't feel super good about it either way. So hopefully that helps you out. Overlay is basically a matchup shop that has two different ways to play fantasy game matchups and progressive win tournaments. Okay. I'll look into it. I've never heard of Overlay before. Sounds interesting, though. Might be worth considering. Might be worth looking at. DeLon Wright, over on assists. Okay, that one's a little different. DeLon Wright, Detroit Pistons. Let's take a look here at DeLon Wright and see where they've got him over on the PrizePicks board for assists. All right, so we got to scroll down a little ways here, but he's at 6 assists taking on the Chicago Bulls. So the first thing that I typically look at when considering any of these guys is the game totals. So the game totals, I think I've already talked about this, not super high in this game. So going over on any of these guys is a little more difficult for me to stomach. I wish there was more points in this. If there was more points in this, I'd probably have no problem taking the over on DeLon Wright. But we're going to look at his game logs here and see how he's done in his last few games. Obviously, he had a long layoff, but he's been back here for a number of games, so we've got a pretty decent sample size recently. All right, so as you can see, back on March 11th, 4 assists. Then he comes back with 5 assists, so those would both be under, 2 unders in a row. But then his last 3 games, he's been crushing the assists, 8, 8, and 8. 3 games in a row where he has went over this 6 assist total here. Now, we're going to dial it back here and look at his previous matchup against the Chicago Bulls. He drops 4 assists against him there. That would put him under. Looking for any other previous matchups against the Bulls. Not seeing any. So, yeah, game logs are looking good in his last 3, dropping 8 assists in each of those games. But his previous matchup against the Bulls, he only dropped 4. Now, maybe we can look at his 30-game season average, 30-game average, and 10-game averages and get a better idea of how DeLon Wright's been distributing the basketball for this Detroit Pistons ball club. So for the season, DeLon Wright is at 5.1 assists, which puts him under the 6 for today. Over his last 30 games, DeLon Wright has been at 5.1 assists, so still under 6 assists. And then over the last 10, DeLon Wright, 6.3 assists. So he's been dishing the ball a lot better here in his last 10 games. So looking pretty good here for DeLon Wright, trending in the right direction in terms of assists if you're looking to take the over on DeLon Wright. Let's see if we've got a single stat prop for him up on the sports books. We do indeed. So DraftKings Sportsbook, they got him at 5.5 assists. People are taking the over by quite a bit here, looking like the strong play over on 5.5 assists. On FanDuel Sportsbook, he's at 5.5 there as well. People are definitely taking the over. BetMGM has him at 5.5. They're taking the over. And finally, PointsBet, they've got him at 5.5 as well. People are strongly taking the over. So I would say take the over on DeLon Wright. Worst case scenario, he hits 6 assists and you push. You still get paid on a push. I know it's not as much money, I know it's not as much money, but you're still going to get paid on a push. So I would probably lean toward the over on DeLon Wright. Hopefully that helps you out, Mr. Trill Fate. Michael wants to know if Kyle Lowry can go over on assists, or if Joe Harris can go over on real life points, or if Michael Porter Jr. is a good play for points or rebounds. All right, cool. I will go ahead and look at that for you, Michael. I will hit on all of those for you, and then we will call it a day. We're reaching about an hour here on this live stream, so I will probably wrap it up with those last few plays. So let's take a look at Kyle Lowry assists first. Kyle Lowry's at 7.5 assists. Now, he was up at like 9.5 at one point, but that was when Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam were out of the lineup. His assists have finally kind of come down a little bit, and they're down at 7.5. So this is an interesting one. Let's take a look at this game here and get an idea of the totals and spread. So you can see that Toronto's at 112.5, pretty good total for their side, but Cleveland 105. So you're talking about a 7.5 point spread. I'd put this one in an orange category for me in terms of blowout risk. I think that there's a pretty high possibility of this game blowing out. Cleveland's just not a very good ball club. So let's take a look at Kyle Lowry and see how he has been distributing the basketball of late. You can see in his last 5 games, granted, some of these games are without Siakam and Fred VanVleet, so we have to take that into consideration, but 12 puts him over, 8, over, 15, over, and finally 8 again against the Utah Jazz in his last game. So taking the over on Kyle Lowry assists lately has been the way to go. We can dial it back and see if we have a previous game log of Raptors, Cavaliers, and maybe we can get a better idea of how Kyle Lowry did in that matchup. But I went all the way back to December, and I don't see any previous game logs of him versus the Cavies. So let's move ahead here, and we could go ahead and talk about his averages for the season, for a 30 game and for 10 game, and get a better idea of how he's been doing. All right, so Kyle Lowry at 7.5 assists for the season. That's a push based on today's projection. If we go to his last 30 games, 7.4 assists, just a slight dip, puts him under that 7.5. And in his last 10 games, his assists are up to 10. So distributing the basketball quite a bit better here in his last 10. Of course, though, I'm going to keep mentioning it. No VanVleet, no Siakam for a lot of those games. Now, finally, the last thing we'll look at is RotoWire, and we'll take a look at Lowry and see what they have him up there at. So DraftKings Sportsbook has him at 7.5. People are taking the over on the 7.5. FanDuel Sportsbook, 7.5. They're taking the over there. And BetMGM, they're taking the over as well. So the over looking like the way to go on Kyle Lowry. Hey, Mason, I appreciate it, buddy. I don't know if I'm the GOAT, but, I do what I can to try and help everyone out who is in my community, the Out of Bounds DFS community. If you're not in there yet and you're watching this for the very first time, well, first of all, subscribe to this YouTube channel because I do PrizePicks videos daily, mostly focused on NBA right now. But also, I'm going to leave a link to the Discord, which is our kind of chat room community where you could go and join that for free. Lots of action, lots of talk about NBA and everything in there. And then for like $20 a month, I go above and beyond what I do in these videos and dig in even deeper on more players, more stats, and try to help you guys get a winning edge. We've got over 170 premium members. So fantastic group of people in there who are willing to help with NBA, with esports, with golf, with MMA, you name it. We're winning in all the different sports. It's a lot of fun. So definitely join the Discord if you're not in there yet. Who else did you have here? We did Kyle Lowry assist, Joe Harris over points. Let's look at Joe Harris and his real life points today. Hopefully you meant real life points. I'm not sure if you meant real life points or fantasy points, but Joe Harris, real life points. He's at 14.5. So we've already talked about the game totals here. Looking very good on the Brooklyn side of things. 128.5 real points for this Brooklyn Nets team. Washington, 128.5 point spread. So let's take a look at Joe Harris and see how he's been scoring the basketball lately. All right, scroll on over here. In his last 5 games, you could see that he has went under, over in his last 2. So he has went over in his last 2 games in terms of scoring. Now, I don't remember if Brooklyn had significant injury news. Kevin Durant obviously out. Blake Griffin's expected to play a little bit. I don't know that that impacts Joe Harris and his ability to score the basketball a whole lot. Hello from Greece. All right. Well, hello from Tampa, Florida, USA. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. Love to see that. We're going international. Forget just national and domestic. We're going international here. So Joe Harris went over in his last 5 games twice and under in 3 of them. Let's take a look at his points over on RotoWire and see if they've got Joe Harris up. They do. So on this 14.5, it looks like people are betting the over on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, they are betting the over. Over on BetMGM, they're betting the over. And on PointsBet, they're betting the over as well. So I would say that Joe Harris over this 14.5 number has been a good way to go here. But we'll also look at his averages for the season. The 30-game averages and the 10-game averages to get a better idea on Joe Harris. Now, the ones that I would take into most consideration, or the ones that I would weight the heaviest, are his last 10-game averages, as those will be the most recent game logs. So for the season, 14.7 points puts him over the 14.5. In his last 30, he has scored the ball pretty well there, going up to 14.9 points. And finally, in his last 10, Joe Harris, 13.9. So his scoring average has actually dipped in his last 10. So that's a little bit scary. But as we talked about, he is kind of the third wheel right now behind James Harden, behind Kyrie Irving. This game, like I said, anytime you face Washington, everything seems to rise. Real life points, fantasy points, rebounds, assists, everything goes up. Washington is just a great team to play. They're a very up-tempo team. There's more points, more everything to be had from those guys. So who else did you have here? Michael Porter Jr. over points or over rebounds. All right, we're going to wrap it up with that one. Let's look at Michael Porter Jr. real quick and see how he's been doing with the points and rebounds. So we already got the points set up here. He's at 17.5 points. This game's going to be tipping off here in less than an hour. So let's look at Michael Porter Jr.'s averages for the season and everything. All right. So for the season, he is scoring 15.8 points, which puts him under. And then you mentioned his rebounds as well. Where do they have him for rebounds today? Is it just me, or is he not up here for rebounds? Did I miss him? I missed him. He's at 7.5 rebounds. So 17.5 points and 7.5 rebounds under, and the rebounds he is under for the season. His last 30 games, under for points, under for rebounds. And his last 10 games, over for points and over for rebounds. So he's taken a bigger step here in the last 10 games. And I think Jamal Murray has actually taken a step down. Porter Jr. playing a lot better basketball in his last 10 games, as you can tell, versus his 30 and his season averages. So making a lot of sense here for Michael Porter Jr. Now, let's take a look and see where he's at in his last few games, just to take it a step further for you and get you a better idea of how he's been doing. So we'll select Denver. We'll go to Michael Porter Jr. We'll scroll on over here. And in his last 5, he has went over points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in a row. So the over on points looking super solid, really good find there. And the rebounds over, and under. So he's went over rebounds 4 out of 5. He's went over points 5 out of 5. So I'm really liking the way that Michael Porter's points and rebounds are looking. He's just playing a lot better basketball. And then finally, we'll look at the various sports books and see how they have Michael Porter stacking up here in terms of points. At 17.5 on DraftKings Sportsbook, not really seeing any action either way. Over on FanDuel, people are taking the under, surprisingly, on the 17.5 points, just a slight under. Over on BetMGM, they are taking the over on the 17.5 points. And then finally on PointsBet, you can see that they're pretty much split in terms of the 17.5 points. So we'll also head on over to his rebounds and look at the 7.5 rebounds. People are taking the over on DraftKings on that, over on FanDuel, over on BetMGM, and over on PointsBet. So hopefully that answers your questions on Michael Porter Jr. Looking like a really good play in both real life points and rebounds. And the game totals are great. The spread is competitive enough where I think this game stays close. So I think Michael Porter Jr. makes a lot of sense in terms of going over. So great find there, Michael. I think that, that's a good way to go. But that's going to do it for the stream today. I hope you guys found some value. I hope you guys liked this. Make sure you hit the like on this video if you did like what I did for you today in this particular video. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We're over 700 subscribers. We're over 500 Discord members. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you are. Turn on notifications, because when I go live on these videos, it'll instantly notify you and you'll know to tune in and get some good information. So that's going to do it for today, man. I hope you guys win some money tonight. Let's go out and get it. This is CJ for Out of Bounds DFS. We'll catch you in the next one, guys. Peace.